Anyway, it's been what, nearly a month, I think, mate, since we last sat down.
It has. We definitely need to get a wee bit better at this. I've just had I'm not even going to get into it, but you know the score. I've had a few things to deal with in recent weeks that have required attention that have just made this really plausible. And, you took a well-earned break as well, I think. You know what I mean?
Aye, for sure, mate. Went and took some mushrooms in a forest. It was fucking... It was it was good, but it was like well earned, actually. Like then, I think I'd done like nearly 20 days on the bounce, and gone shooting stand-up comedy on a Friday and a Saturday night with a fucking 5-day week, Monday to Fridays. Just when you take on too much, you don't even realise it. You just think, oh, that's going to get me $2,000. This is going to get me this, and that will see me through to Christmas. And then you're like waking up with fucking tonsillitis and a chest infection, and then you're just like, I've just ran myself into the fucking ground here.
Aye.
So a bit of a thing about, I've spoke about it plenty before, but just having to edit, and you just need to tell yourself where to stop. Like, I'm actually getting used to, this is another thing, like you just get used to it, self-employment, is having work there that needs done, but not doing it right now. Like, if I work, usually in work, you would be like, here's my workload for the day, and I'll get that done the day, and I'll feel satisfied when I leave. But you can't, like, I was doing shit like waking up at 6 in the morning and editing, and then seeing clients for 10 to 8 o'clock at night, and it's like, I can't do that.
No, that's no sustainable. Is it?
Instagram would tell you it is, mate. Like, side hustle and
have it
all.
all.
But no, it's not sustainable at all, mate. So I'd made the decision to just no expand my books for like 3 months. I'm training. I'm back in, not even just like my weekly training that I keep doing ongoing. I've started doing more certificates and the CBT that I'm doing to go on to like different levels.
Yeah.
And I can't do that. Study, classes, and fucking, everything else that I've been up to.
There are fucking limits, isn't there? You know what I mean?
For sure, mate.
Definitely, like, aware of that after, recent events and stuff like that, you know what I mean? Like, but it's a lot's been on in the meantime. I think probably like the one that jumped out the most at me is, I know we don't talk about football a lot, but obviously the whole Newcastle thing.
Mate, fucking hell.
Obviously it's a bit of a weird one. I mean, the Premier League has become, it was already a bit pantomime in terms of just the absolute pornographic amounts of money that were thrown about, and the lax standards for who gets to throw that money about and when. But bringing in the Saudi royal family when they're just openly killing their own citizens in other countries and stuff like that, amongst all sorts of other stuff, is just, to me, it's just absolute madness. You know what I mean? Like,
there was people there that as well, like, did you see the videos of like them? They were out in the streets celebrating.
I can't blame Newcastle fans in a sense, you know what I mean? Like, it's every, like, from a fan's perspective, it's every fan's dream that some billionaire rocks up and wants to start throwing money about in your club. You know what I mean? Like, so there's a sense in which I can't blame them. You know what I mean? Like, they've not went out and solicited this, particular owner or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, it's just something that's happened and they're there. So somebody comes into Celtic and starts throwing £100 million about, there's probably an extent to which I'm going to be happy, you know what I mean? Like, so I'm not too hard on them in that respect. They don't make the rules about who should and shouldn't own a football club.
I agree. I don't think Celtic fans would have been out in the streets. I think there would have been protests, mate. I mean, just the fact that we don't even like people that vote Tory on the board, and we protest that. I think if the Saudi royal family, I genuinely think that Celtic, there's a portion of the Celtic support, and they seem to be the real fanatical people that are quite socially aware. What I found really interesting is how
those protests very rarely make any difference to the actual business of the board. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, but I think that we would be out being like, we're not happy about this. But what
I think there definitely would be fans out there that were like that, but I don't know that it would necessarily change an awful lot.
I don't think it would change it. I mean, know that how many times did the Newcastle fans try and protest Mike Ashley? But I mean, there was a lot of Newcastle fans and seeing a lot of commentary pre the takeover about how Ashley was like unethical and his business practices, but then they're out, cheering. It was a weird one. I was sitting looking at it thinking about how people's morals go out the window when there's a real life advantage to a lack of morality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's quite a funny one that, like, they want to be... It's very, like, Newcastle's one of the places where, like, Liverpool, Glasgow, where people claim to be really socially conscious, but then they're pretty much out fucking celebrating Adolf Hitler taking another fucking football club. Do you know what I mean? Like in a modern...
This is the thing. I think we're like only a few steps away from like an actual fucking Bond villain. Like, you know, taking our, you know, whatever, Liverpool and like building a lair underneath Anfield. You know what I mean? Like, you know, we're no far off that as it stands.
I think,
be honest with you.
Like, it's all right for us to sit and sort of like, sit and point at it. But I agree with you, mate. Like, Newcastle fans are just celebrating their football team, getting a new owner and people that are going to invest in their club and maybe, but like the English Premier League thing, which is just basically like you're saying, like buying sort of victory and football's kind of like losing. So we've spoke about this a lot. Like I think a couple of times, not a lot, but football's kind of losing its purpose where it came from. And
definitely
it's
in this country,
mate, it's pantomime. It's total pantomime now. Like football teams were always grassroots. They were always about their communities. And I mean, what do these people? They don't not give a fuck. This is basically like dick measuring. They're wanting to take on these projects and win a European Cup. It's like people that go online and talk about how they took fucking Plymouth Argyle to the Champions League final, Football Manager, but with billions of pounds. But not only that, like murder and tyranny sitting behind it.
What's going on in places like Yemen and all the rest of it, and we're just like, and you come, and I think it's probably like kind of partly like the sort of cherry on the cake, the state the Premier League in England is in the new. You look at this whole Pandora Papers thing that came out recently, and it was like,
I've seen this
the UK is
and
like,
hashtags, but I've got no idea
it's
what's
like, it's all tax dodging, and it's the
Right.
same as what was the one the other year,
the Panama Papers that David Cameron and all that were in. So who was implemented this time?
Pretty much everybody. I mean, it was one of the ones where I think even guys like the Financial Times and that, when they were reporting, they were a bit like, oh, fuck this shit again. You know what I mean? Like, where obviously nothing gets done with, but the country is essentially a money laundering vehicle for foreign money. You know what I mean? Like guys in, you know, Saudi and Qatar and all these places where they realise that their natural resources are running low or finite, and, you know, buying a Premier League club allows you basically to kind of just move your money out of the country before the bottom falls out of it altogether, and, you know, something daft like, you know, your money ends up with the people of your country.
So redistribution of wealth.
So this is really just a fucking, you know, buying a Premier League club is like the billionaire equivalent of a midnight flit. You know what I mean? Like, where they'll just basically like, get the fucking money out of here as quickly as we can.
So it's like legitimate money laundering's happening.
Well, I mean, that's probably the way I would describe it. You know what I mean? Like, it's going on since Abramovich, through the guy that previously owned Leicester, before their most recent owner, and the family, you know, before the crash. And was it Thaksin Shinawatra or something? The guy's name was, the guy for Thailand. He was extremely dodgy. I mean, you know, we're going to have like Duarte and like Trump owning clubs. You know what I mean? It'll just be this new place where they can go and just wash all their money. And as I say, you know, offshore tax havens set up by Britain, the British financial services industry are all, as I say,
implicit in this.
Essentially built to facilitate it, not even implicit, like explicitly designed to facilitate this type of money moving about. And so long as it's moving in and around Britain and football clubs and fancy hotels and whatever else it happens to be, then all the better for them. Exactly. Same as the transfer market. It's just about moving the money. You know what I mean? Like, making sure it's staying in the one place for too long so that anybody can tax it.
But I think like what you sort of said there about like, oh, something crazy, like, you know, the money going to the people of your country. Like, really and truly, this is where we're kind of at, isn't it? Is that people are making money for like these show pony shit, like buying a football team, buying a baseball team, going to the moon, or, you know, whatever it is. It's all just show pony. And see, there was something else that happened this week that just solidified this. Did you see the footage of fucking William Shatner?
So I did.
Right, and like, William Shatner had a real moment, was about to have a real emotional moment, human moment on camera. This guy has played a character. He's played the character. I mean, him and Mark Hamill and James Earl Jones, maybe, like, you know, like the three biggest space characters, Kirk and Luke Skywalker. Like, this guy has, Jeff Bezos has clearly taken this guy into space as like a PR event.
I mean, the guy's 90 years old. Like, I know they want this to imply that space travel will be affordable and, you know, achievable for everybody. So they're sending 90-year-olds up into space to prove that, you know, the years and years of discipline and training that like Air Force pilots used to have to go through to become astronauts is now a thing of the past because they've made such advances. And really they're like firing a capsule at the end of space and parachuting back down. You know what I mean? Like,
the thing that really, like, just watching it is that the guy, he's clearly, it's been an ambition. I mean, he's been imagining being this space explorer for like the majority of his life, and he finally gets to go to space. We'll say space in air quotes because I'm not actually going to fucking space anyway. I mean,
something that's kind of like space.
They're doing pretty much what that guy did in that hot air balloon and jumped out and parachuted back down to Earth.
It's like a stratosphere or something they're in, you know what I mean?
He's having a real moment, and he's having an emotional moment. And then fuck nugget Bezos comes there and starts scushing a bottle of champagne. And it just shows you that these people aren't the humans, man. Like, they're barely human. Like, he is realising that this megastar, what William Shatner is, I mean, he's iconic.
He's been playing Kirk since the 60s.
He's stealing his fucking press, and he wedges himself in with a bottle of fucking Dom Perignon, and you can actually see the disgust in Shatner's face.
I can see it. It was tangible, his disappointment.
But it's like, what are we doing? And like these guys like Musk and Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos can kid themselves on, and everybody around about them can kid themselves on that they're doing this for humanity. But see, at the end of the day, the American government and the Russian governments did it in the 60s better than what you're doing. What you actually doing, it's like we're basically watching billionaires wank. It's like they can't get it up. They need 10 Viagra to get it up now. You know, they're so fucked in the head that now they need to shoot themselves into space to be like, here's how I'll be better than everybody else. And it's like, you're actually just proving to the world how much of a fucking prick you actually are. Like,
especially when you consider that the folks sitting in these warehouses are fucking, you know, pissing in bottles so that they don't get docked minutes out their wages and stuff.
I don't know
like
if
that,
I mentioned
you know
this in the last podcast, but did you see when he first went and it was like, this is to everybody who's bought anything or worked at Amazon, you have paid for this.
I think we did touch on that.
We'll
like, I don't think that made me happy, that particular one.
It made it even worse. But I mean, the connection is really like what we're doing now is, and we've spoke about it before, like Bahrainian and Dubai princes building side-by-side buildings to see who can get the biggest building. And really it's like the modern equivalent of the fucking midlife sports car. It's just that they've got so much resource, that the rich have got so much resource now that it's new buildings, spaceships, and fucking football teams. Like, they're buying institutions.
Yeah.
And like, if the arse collapses out of economies, like, these guys are going to drop your football team like a fucking shitty
they'll
rag.
just move their money into whatever asset will actually hold its value at that point in time. You know what I mean? Because that's all they're doing now, is just moving their assets into, or moving their, you know, money into an asset that has value for the moment. You know what I mean? Like, so you'll definitely see that. But I did feel for William Shatner. You know what I mean? Like, I've got to say, because it was one of the points that I raised. I had put to one side when I came in, was like, we questioned whether or no, you know, we were going to have like Rockefeller moments and like Carnegie moments where these guys would push each other to a point where they actually like progress society. And I think when you see, you know what I mean, he's getting fucking champagne sprayed in his face like it's a magnum of fucking Jeff Bezos' spunk, you know what I mean? Like, and you're just like, this is no like the bold new frontier. This is no where man has, you know, never gone before sort of thing for, you know, the Star Trek balance, you know what I mean? Like,
I think for Star Trek fans as well, like, I've never been a Trekkie. And obviously there's been modern versions like Next Generation that I watched out of habit, and because it was on at a time.
We had 4 TV channels.
Exactly. And that was one of them, and everything else at 6 was news at that time. And then Discovery, which have been really good, like a sort of modernisation. But talking to people that we've, like common mates, whatever, that have been into Star Trek, one of the big ideas that Star Trek really perpetuates is that in the future, humanity's going to really need to come together, and we're going to really need to go and explore. And I think it's kind of metaphorical when you could take it as that we're going to explore these new frontiers together, and there's different races. I mean, I think that one of the first interracial kisses on screen happened between Uhura and Kirk in the 60s. Obviously, there's been a lot of jokes about like him kissing aliens and all that kind of thing, but I think they were really symbolic at the time, and sort of like the civil rights movements and stuff. And I think a lot of the TV execs were kind of, you know, try to reject it, but they stuck to their guns. But I really think that talking to people that are Trekkies, it's like this idea that the future is bright and that we will come together and we will stop fighting each other and actually will be peacekeepers within if there are other species in the galaxy.
I will let go of their egos. Which
exactly
is not what Jeff Bezos was doing when he was
I,
squishing him in the face with Dom Perignon.
In fact, he took the main character of that and kind of like slapped him in the face live on TV, man.
Literally.
It was kind of symbolic in itself.
It was like, you know, hiring a bloody clown to come and play a birthday party, then balking him out in front of the entire audience, you know what I mean? Like, it was pretty grim. So it was like, and if I was William Shatner, I would not be in any mad rush to be dealing with Jeff Bezos again anytime soon, you know what I mean? Like, but at the same time, it's one of them. You get in bed with guys like that, you know, you're playing their game.
They play with fire, you get burnt, unfortunately. But would anybody be able to resist it? I'm not entirely sure. I don't even know if he may be paid. He may be even paid. I mean, they're talking about charging like £250,000 to send people up, and the first passenger, so that he might have even fucking paid for it. And
quite possibly.
And if that's the case, it's even worse that he get paid to realise his dream, but then have it fucking scooshed in his face like 10 seconds later after a billionaire fuck nugget, you know what I mean? Like, and there is a lot of like sort of nihilism about billionaires and the billionaire class and blah blah blah. I think like quite a lot of the nihilism's kind of misplaced, in that people think that they're deliberately, you know, like doing these things, and I think the only thing that they're really doing is competing with each other, and it's a whole new playing field of competition between these people. But the nihilism comes in, or the realization that these people are just idiots. Like, I mean, Elon Musk, if you watch any interview that guy's done, like he's barely human as well. Like,
they've certainly lost connection with something that used to make them human, you know what I mean? Like, whether that was ever there with some of them, I've got no idea. But when you see the types of behaviour that we're talking about now, where it is literally just about throwing money about to, you know, essentially pad your own ego when, you know, you can't go and buy a fucking carton of milk in some places. You know what I mean?
I mean, we've definitely flung ideas backwards and forwards, but how do we stop this? Like, it
tax the absolute shit out of them.
It needs to end. it totally needs to end. And see, of late, like talking and thinking about this, I hate that I'm starting to like lean towards like one world tax, where it's like we need like one currency, one tax system. Like, this whole compartmentalization is what people do to actually control things and get things their own way and keep the status quo and to break it. It seems like we kind of need to get into a place where everybody gets on the same page and that there's just a standard taxation that happens.
I mean, I can definitely say that would be something that I'd be up for at least exploring. I don't know what the logistics it would be, to be honest with you. You're always going to have places like Ireland or Guernsey or, you know, Cayman Islands, Delaware, all these other places that deliberately, you know, set up their tax structures in a manner that makes them attractive to
look at Texas,
these big companies and stuff like that. So
it's been like a mass migration of people from LA to Texas, and it's really to avoid tax, because Biden's come in and went, right, well, the state senator that get voted in's like, we're putting the income tax up, and for people, obviously LA's a fucking rich city. For people like comedians, actors, media people, that means, you know, no making 20 million next year, it means making 15 million, and they think, do you know what we'll do? I'm going to uproot my family and I'm going to move to Texas.
Is this why Rogan has moved?
Oh, 100%. And some of the fucking vitriol that's come out about why they're doing it, and the homeless people and that, it's like, go away, take your head for a fucking steep, man. You're literally trying to save some money. Like, it's so clear, like, that it's an exercise in saving money. Do you know what's hilarious? They're all moving back. Now that the pandemic's gone, it's been an exercise in mental illness, mate. Like, because now they're all going, oh shit, there's nothing in Texas. I need to go back to LA. So
it's like that thing in Get Shorty, where, you know, John Travolta's character rocks up in the Mummobile, the pure people carrier, and like Danny DeVito's like, you're pretty cool, and you're driving one of these like people carriers, and he's like, aye, whatever. And it's just a scene in the movie where it's the last car left when he was renting a car or something stupid like that, right? And then by the end of the movie, everybody's driving about Hollywood in these, you know, black SUV sort of people carrier things, you know what I mean? Like, where that moment of like, you know, the idea infects everybody else. And I think that's what you're doing. They've all fucked off to Texas, now they're all fucking off back. And it's just another like celebrity trend into it.
Aye, mate, there's somebody that I follow on Instagram, they've not even got like their podcast studio in that set up, and they're like, stripped out their units, sold their house, took their kids, and they've been there for like 3-4 months, and now they're like, I need to go back because they're having to commute every day
from Texas,
to LA to get their work done. It's like, I think like during the
that
pandemic,
in itself is ridiculous.
Aye,
You know what I mean?
I mean, mate, Rogan's private jetting people out to these podcasts
in Texas.
Insanity, like
Aye.
absolute insanity is happening, and I think it's been COVID that's triggered it. I mean, obviously, like the pandemic's probably made a lot of people take a look at their life and go, I'm not happy with this, I'm not happy with that. But I think it's also, as we're seeing en masse, causing a lot of people to just sort of like their house of cards has crumbled underneath them.
Oh, aye.
You know what I mean? Did
Definitely.
you see the footage of the boys in the hospital yesterday? With their
Oh, is this
legal
the ones
documents?
that were doing they were like the fucking Independence Rebellion guys who were like, I'm here to report a war crime. It was that type of shit, wasn't it?
Exactly.
Aye.
Guys, I mean, I don't mean to be, judgmental, but dudes in fucking Puma tracksuits claiming to be saying that she's got a legal obligation to take it because it's a legal document that and he's serving her papers, and it's like
In a hospital.
he doesn't even understand what he's talking about. Like it's insane, mate.
He's just regurgitating absolute fucking nonsense. Like they cunts that a couple of weeks ago stormed Edinburgh Castle. We're here to claim Edinburgh Castle back under the rights of the Magna Carta and blah blah blah, and like
oh mate,
had like 3 minutes. There was like 10 of them standing in the main sort of courtyard at Edinburgh Castle, being like, "We claim this for the people of Scotland," and it was just the most cringe shit I've ever seen in my life. So it's like, and you get it as well. It's maybe another part of this whole like people collapsing throughout the course of the pandemic that you're talking about, and that hospital thing, along with Edinburgh Castle, along with the, even like the Insulated Britain characters that are like sitting on motorways because stopping one person for getting their ways to school in the morning is the same as fucking saving the planet. And you're like, pick a better fight, you know what I mean? Like,
aye.
but the actual behaviour of people has significantly twisted in a few folk, like where, their grip on reality has definitely slipped, and I think
For sure, mate.
maybe being locked up in the house for 18 months with only their own thoughts to, keep them has maybe not panned out so well for some folk. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, you're so right. You're bang on. I think it's been a combination. I don't even think it's even that sort of like people's own thoughts. I think that there's that, and it's combined with the fact that all our internet channels are all just screaming back positive feedback with any idea. It's not even with nonsense ideas. Like if I've got a bunch of people that believe what I believe in and I cite it out there, they're obviously going to come back and go, "Aye, you're right." So I think it's like people are talking about like one of the big advantages of the internet and blah 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 is that people can come together and we can find their own people. And it's like maybe having a mix of people's like a real good thing, because I mean we're even seeing, people are just shutting down opposite ideals that they believe. It's not even like people can't even critically think anymore. Like I seen something that saying that just because Dave Chappelle on his stand-up special, I don't know if you've watched it.
I've not watched it yet. I've seen the other sort of 5 specials prior to this one, and obviously get that there's been a kick-up with Netflix employees about platforming somebody who is apparently transphobic, and that they did a walkout, I think, in recent days, not necessarily about Dave Chappelle, but more about how Netflix itself dealt with like their complaints about the issue. Which is fine, which is totally fine. If people think that they're platforming a transphobe and they don't want to do that, that's fine. Watching it, I can understand why people think it's transphobic, but it's not for me. Like, he refers to himself as a TERF, and he's essentially like satirising a lot in a lot of respects. One of the previous ones I'd watched, so I watched the first episode where it came up, and he made a couple of trans jokes, and then he knew that got to people, and had like some one-liners that he bashed out, and then kind of basically like moved on. There was a bit of a kick-up about it after the first special, and then I think in the third special he went back to it. But when he went back to it, see if you take like the jokes or the punchlines out of the equation and actually listen to his words, because he tells stories, Dave Chappelle, very like, Billy Connolly-esque in that sense, where he takes what he wants to say and packages it in a funny story. And when in the third special, I seen the section where he talks about transgenders and a transgender fan who wrote to him and stuff like that. And he was just basically like, none of this up here is real. Like, you know, I'm sorry that you have been offended by the fact that I made these jokes, but they're jokes. Like, I don't have anybody in mind. You know, he's a devout Muslim. He's very, like, in touch with himself emotionally. Like, when you hear him talk, and it's no, you can't have the type of insight and the type of, you know, sort of self-consciousness that guy's got and actually be a bigot. Like, I just don't see it myself. So, is he saying controversial stuff? Aye, he is. But that's what he's doing. When we were talking about Janie Godley the other week there, and I said, well, look, on that stage, when you're out there plying your trade as a stand-up comedian, you have the protection that is your job, and you're out there, and if people want to come and pay and see you, then that's their choice. And like Dave Chappelle's got the exact same thing, where off the stage, is there a single thing that anybody can point to that's no an obvious joke? I don't think there is. You know what I mean? Like, the guy is, you know, his philosophy is very sort of peace and love in a lot of respects.
For sure,
you know what I mean?
Within
like,
the special as well, you know, without fucking no spoilers, like, no, like, going to say any of the punchlines or any of the jokes. I want to be able to do them justice anyway, but he talks about how within the TERF community is like mania.
Aye.
And he's like, and he doesn't refer to himself as a TERF. He says that if the definition of being being a TERF is that you believe that sex and gender are linked and that you don't have a choice and it's biological, then he's just like, that's what I believe. And that's it. Like, that's all that he really says. And if somebody's like, well, that's transphobic because the World Health Organization and the latest science is saying that that is not true, that, you know, sex is a biological thing that you're born with, and then gender is an identity and a choice, then that just makes Dave Chappelle wrong. It doesn't, it makes him ignorant. It doesn't, I don't think it makes you transphobic to go, well, here's my opinion. I think that's an opportunity to go educate the guy. Don't shut him down. Like, the thing that really worries me about this is that there seems to be a growing, like, a protected sort of class of people, and it's all about identity. It's like, if I am a Catholic, I should be the only person that expresses any opinion on Catholicism. And it's like, it can't be like that. You can't make it so that it's only the people within the community that can comment on the issues within the community, because then you're not going to get any counterpoints. And I don't agree with Dave Chappelle. And actually, when he was sort of talking about it, I was like, kind of like, oh no, like, he mentions J.K. Rowling, and you're like, go and look at what these people are doing online. They're actually like making it part of their identity to believe this, which isn't right. And guys like the Father Ted guy that we talk about, that
become extremists.
A car backfires at Glasgow Green, he hits the deck because he's like, my life's under threat for talking about the trans issue. And you're like, mate, you're paranoid delusional, like mentally unwell that needs help. But Dave Chappelle, he tells an amazing story about a trans friend that committed suicide because of the hate that she got online. And he's like, the pronouns, I'm fine with that. You know, it's all this. I don't understand what's transphobic about it, other than expressing a personal opinion that goes against what the science and what the sort of health community says. So he's just wrong and ignorant. It's like, it's just,
I think he sums it up best when in one of the previous specials that I watched, where he was like, I'm all for you being whoever the fuck you want to be, but I don't really see how much I need to give a fuck about what you want to be. Like, who you want to be is your business. Like, go and live your life, go and be free, go and express, or, you know, be whoever you want in whatever way you want. But like, that's your business. Like, don't expect me to be like sitting here waving flags for you because, you know, I've got main shit on. And that was kind of like one of the explanations he gave, where he was like, do you know what? I've got nothing against anybody. Like, and I genuinely believe he is a guy who is conscious of prejudice and bias and all these other things. Like,
of course. How could they not be considering his race? You know what I mean?
Exactly. But at the same time, on the other side of that sort of protected class you're talking about, I definitely think there is an element of that where, you know, to be part of a society, you know, which is what a lot of marginalised people are asking for, want to be included, want inclusion, and for that to be the case, there are positives and negatives of being you know, contributing member of society. You know what I mean? And although you maybe have increased visibility of trans people and their issues and, you know, why their rights are being infringed on, because they are. Like, they're, you know, legislatively speaking, in the UK and in the US, like, there are huge steps being taken to roll back, you know, legislative gains that, you know, trans and gay people have had. So there is a battle on in that respect, you know what I mean? Like, the fanatical sort of wailing and sort of gnashing of teeth that goes along with it is a bit cartoonish in some respects, you know, like when you think of Linehan and, you know, all the rest of it. And I think, you know, somebody like Dave Chappelle, he looks as though he's gone down the path that these people have went down, and we'll be directly referencing because he will have absolutely done his research as part of writing his actual set. You know what I mean? Like, there's not a word that he says during any, you know, stand-up show that probably isn't like 100% deliberate and like specifically chosen to have the impact that it had, because that's his fucking job. You know what I mean? Like, but being part of society means that if people are going to have criticism, people, so long as it's no abuse, so long as it doesn't wander into illegal, you know, that difference of opinion, that different belief that you're talking about, like, you need to be open to it. You know what I mean? Like, because that's the price of entry. You know what I mean? Like, you know, guys like Chappelle will have had, you know, jokes about race, jokes about politics, jokes about money, sex. You know what I mean? I've watched the guy since like Chappelle Show. You know what I mean? Like, nobody gets a pass, you know what I mean, in terms of his comedy. And I would say, and in some respects, the fact that somebody like Dave Chappelle is spending the time trying to, like, I don't know, intellectualise what he thinks and feels on the issue shows that he considers them and their issues on a par with all the other issues in society in a certain respect.
Absolutely. What I mean? I mean, one of the things that he does that I don't agree with is that he wants to sort of like play the sort of civil rights movements, the different civil rights movements off against each other. And I think that's quite a lot of what the sort of TERF community are really doing, is that, like, well, hold on, women don't have all their rights yet, so why are we now shifting the focus onto this other community? No realising that we're all kind of a victim of patriarchal, capitalistic sort of ways that we've kind of developed over the last 200 years, maybe even further than that, way further back. But that if they're all looking for the same thing, like it's all the same fight, and this is what the status quo wants you to do. They want you to fight against each other and try and jostle for position. Like I was saying to somebody the other day, remember watching a documentary or a podcast where somebody was saying, I don't understand why Mexicans are so racist towards black people and why black people are so racist towards Mexican people, and they were using sort of circumstantial evidence for that. There was it was a very general sweep, and I get that, but there is definitely like a weird thing that happens where people want to punch down. They don't feel like they can punch up, so they start punching down. It's not everybody that does that, but I was saying that it's kind of feels like the same thing. It's kind of like, well, wait a minute, we've not had our full bill of what we were looking for. Yeah. And now this new wave of people are coming, and it's definitely happening amongst sort of the LGB alliance, where it's like lesbian gay and a section of lesbian gay and bi people are kind of like, we want our rights before we start to look at them. And it's kind of like, it's the same fight. It's the same fight. Their win will be your win. Like if we get it for it's about egalitarianism. This is about fighting for the rights of every single fucking person. When we talk about equality, it should be without caveats. It should be without a queuing system. You know what I mean? Like where they have equality or we don't. We don't have steps towards equality, or well, I suppose we do, but we don't have that framework that we can use to be like, right, you're number 3 in the queue, you're number 4 in the queue, and you know, we'll get to you when we're done with these guys. You know what I mean? Like, that's not how it's supposed to work. But I love Dave Chappelle. I think he's one of the greatest comedians. I mean, he's up there with Bill Hicks and guys like Carlin and stuff like that. Like, I think he's an intellect and like a thought process that just, I think most people, and there's times where I don't understand it, because there has been times where I've watched these specials and had to really like go back or some of this and like watch it again and have a think about what I think he's trying to say, other interviews and stuff like that. And I'm convinced that at the point where he made the jokes about, in the sort of the third special, where he was like, look, here's this person wrote to me, blah, 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 it's just
nipped it at that point. You know what I mean? Like, because I'm not interested in hearing him moan about cancel culture when he's got like a 6-part Netflix special. You know what I mean? Like, nobody's cancelling him. He is literally standing on stages going, I think it's going to be another couple of years before I do this again, but I can't be fucked dealing with you guys. And like, he's, you know what I mean? He's actually going to his audience and being like, I don't want to be here talking to you. You know what I mean?
This
like,
one's, he's kind of saying that this is it.
Aye, he says that in everyone, but so he does. Like,
well, he's called it, did they not call this one
the closer?
The closer or something?
But I think it'll be the closer of that series of specials.
Aye, I think that's his
like,
Netflix contract finished, and I think he can sort of like move on. Like, I'm what you just said there is that watching this guy challenges how you think, and whether or not you agree with him or not, I think if you're challenged in your thought processes and you consider it a wee bit, and you can think critically, kind of like what I was saying earlier, and you can come to either a reinforced same conclusion or a new, slightly different, or a completely different. I think there's nothing but positivity in that. But this is what's going back to, like, see when I was thinking when you were talking there, and I was sort of thinking of, like, had the picture in my head. It's like the bit in Gladiator where Joaquin Phoenix's character's watching the sort of the jesters take the piss out of him, and instead of sort of thinking about how he's acting, because ultimately it leads to his death, right? And and I know I don't even know if that's a fucking true story, but what they're doing is they're basically commenting on what they see. They're not taking the piss out of him. He's upset at the way that they're portraying him, but they're portraying him in the way that they see him.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that. It's kind of like, well, if you watch this sort of art or this sort of like output content that challenges how you think, and it sort of changes or it reinforces how you think already, they're like, that's a positive thing. But people get so butthurt about it, and people get so upset, they're so triggered with their emotions and can't deal with their emotions.
This is it.
What they want is to shut it down, and it's not going to work. Like, in fact, what's happening, what you see is that places like YouTube are platforming real transphobic comedians, because the worry, I think, for people is that maybe Dave Chappelle, like, maybe like for a rational sort of standpoint, Dave Chappelle's not a transphobe, but there are real transphobic people that hide behind that sort of stance,
aye,
and have done since forever.
He's gave them cover. Aye, and I think that's why I was saying I think he should have just nipped it in the bud after the third special, because I get the point he was initially trying to make. I get that he was trying to discuss these issues in a sort of equal manner to the other issues that he discusses, but I think he's probably doubled down one too many times on it, because when we're having the same conversation in like 3 or 6 of these specials, then maybe needs to like mix the material up a wee bit. So as I say, I don't fully agree with him. I definitely don't think he's a bigot. I definitely don't think he's a transphobe. I think he's tried to push the envelope in his work based on the reactions, and I think as he's continued to do that, has maybe missed the mark towards the end, but he's still like probably the best living comedian on the face of the planet.
For sure, mate.
You know
I mean,
like,
he's definitely one. He's in the top 4 or 5 greatest comedians of all time.
That first Netflix special where he came back after 10 years was just like absolute fucking tour de force. Like the O.J. Simpson jokes and stuff like that were just, you know, where he takes you one direction, then he's just like fucking slamming you straight into
Tell you was going to do it.
Aye.
I think that's the genius bit. He's just like, I'm going to do this.
Aye.
You totally forget about it, man.
So that's the thing, is he's subtle, he's, you know, articulate, he's intelligent, he fucks with the formula, he fucks with the format, and that's why he's good. And I think he's maybe tried to do that in this instance, and it's, you know, it's maybe no panned out the way they've hoped.
No hat.
You know what I mean?
Aye,
but again, I'll watch it over the weekend.
Dave Chappelle's going to go and retire with his 100 million in the bank, and
back to Ohio with his wife and family, where he can just sort of chill and smoke weed and whatever, and you know, it's a hard life.
Aye, exactly. So you'd mentioned it. What's these protests called? Insulate Britain. I mean,
they look fake as fuck to me. It looks so, I don't know, I'm not wanting to go pure tinfoil hat here, but like 3 pensioners sitting on front of, you know, somebody's school run. I don't get it. It feels like culture war content. It feels like somebody at LBC or the Daily Mail is sending idiots out to go and, you know, get their wee VT footage that they can then throw out on Twitter. You know what I mean? Like, I don't get why a credible sort of climate change organisation would, fuck with the school run and stuff like that.
Related to Extinction Rebellion? Like, what's the...
I've got no idea, to be honest with you, because I found it so hard to take them seriously that all of them looking at their videos and being like pure, I've really not spent an awful lot of time on them, because it's like, I've always had, and since Iraq, have had doubts about the effectiveness or even the point sometimes in protest, because I don't ever really see it meaningfully change an awful lot. This is so even far beyond that like, even effective protest is something that I have my doubts about. This is completely ineffective protest, and I'm like, it's so ineffective and so like, just, I don't get the point in it, that I'm like, why would anybody come up with this strategy? I don't understand it.
I mean, I'm kind of just
like blocking up A roads for like, rush hour traffic.
What you doing? Like, you actually, like, you're not even engaged in what could be effective within that. If you're claiming to be like an environmentalist and an environmental protester, and what, like, you're not even engaging in what would be effective. Like, stopping people driving up and down a motorway is going to do zero for like the environmental problems that we're seeing. Like, there's such huge scales. We need actual fucking change, which is not going to get hit by blocking up a road and stopping people fucking driving their kids to school.
Getting some retweets off of LBC.
100%. What I did find slightly, how would I, fucking arsehole clenching or what just gave me the fear was the support for people to drive over them.
I mean, this is what feels like the natural conclusion to what's going to happen here, or, I hope it doesn't. I really hope it doesn't. But when we've got MPs being, stabbed and, basically murdered for the second time in 5 years, like the discourse is already extremely toxic in this country, and this is before we start to feel the pinches of real, shortages and stuff like that. We've got the aperitif at the minute where, you kind of get a loaf until, the day after the morrow or whatever. But as all of this stuff starts to kick in, I think that toxicity and that sort of atmosphere is only going to rise as people become increasingly unhappy, especially as COVID seems to be going absolutely off its dinger again, and we're not even really into winter yet, you know what I mean? There's health secretaries like 100,000 cases a day, so what? You know what I mean? So I think things are going to get a lot worse in terms of like the discourse and the tone before they get any better, and all it takes is one person to be, heavy on a foot or no quick enough on a brake, or somebody who tries to, give somebody a fright and it goes wrong, and, somebody ends up under a fucking white van, you know what I mean?
Seen it 2 days ago, I think it was reported yesterday, it happened the day before. The woman was nudging a 1.5 ton Range Rover Jeep into a pensioner and was applauded. The Sun reported it as a heroic act, and she was pictured by the Sun like a fucking Instagram photo shoot, mate. It was a fucking joke, and what was even worse was the reaction was good for her, and it's like you see, just exactly like you just said there, a slip off that clutch and she would have fucking flattened that old woman. She'd have flattened her.
Yep.
And it's the media take on it as like protest being problematic is just a government fucking like how into the, like, we need to get rid of protesters. How are we going to do it? We're going to focus our attention on these protests, and people seem to be getting behind it. Just run over them. Just hit them with your motor. She done the right thing. She came out and justified it by saying that, how dare they stop me for taking my kids getting their education? Like, that is a great way to justify it to yourself.
But that isn't excuse for
what's happening.
You know
what's
what I mean?
happening is, and do you know what was even worse, mate? She had on her Instagram account that she's a counsellor. What happened in that moment is she lost control of her emotions, and she decided that she would hit somebody with her fucking car, as light as you want to fucking put it. And she was,
I shouldn't laugh, but it is. I know, but it's outrageous, isn't it?
It's ridiculous how she justified it to herself. And then when the Sun came round with her cameras, she actually stood arse first in front of her Jeep. Like, showing her arse off in front of her Jeep. I'll show you it, mate.
Oh, man. I mean, that is absolutely fucking
you
wild.
Know what? Fuck it.
Nah, I was going to say, I wouldn't have seen it in the Sun, but I can believe
it. But the sort of... just the response to it, mate. I mean, even people on my Twitter were retweeting it and claps, and I'm just like, where's your head at? Like, you think that it's all right to hit somebody with a car because they're inconveniencing you?
I don't get the point in the protest, personally, but I don't think anybody should die for participating in it.
No.
You know what I mean? Like,
No. And like you said, I mean, a slip of a clutch, a heavy fit, a malfunction in the car, she would have murdered somebody and she would have been gone to jail for it.
We're
as well.
fucking kids in the back. What about their education then when they've watched their mum murder somebody?
It's just,
you know what I mean?
I mean, I can't get my head around that. I cannot get my head around it. I can't get my head around what they think that they're doing with the protest, although I can kind of understand, like, you know, if you just want to do something for the cameras, you know.
I don't get why the government's even trying to ban protests. It's been completely ineffective for like 15, 20 years in this country. They just ignore people and get away with it anyway. So, like, I don't see why we're legislating. Like, let people go and protest. It's probably no something that we want to hear for, you know, the type of show that we are. But at the same time, that's just my personal opinion, is that I can't remember the last time I actually seen widespread protest actually make a difference in this country. So why we're trying to ban it, or why people are potentially going to fucking die for it, especially in such a ridiculous wee tiny microcosm, you know what I mean? Like getting like splattered across the forecourt and Asda, you know what I mean? Like, because climate change, you know, it makes perfect sense on both ends, you know what I mean? Like, or doesn't it, as the
Put
case
your
is,
energy into
you know
something
what I mean?
actually fucking productive. Like,
Then what is productive? We've got this COP26 coming, and I'd actually asked the question on it where, and this is maybe like my, you know, sort of negativity that maybe is coming to the fore here, but this is another one of these ones where we've got the entirety of human history and summits and, you know, conferences and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, so what? And I asked the question on the Twitter, was like, what are the actual goals? What are the objectives of COP26? Because we already have this gold standard Paris climate change agreement in place that some countries don't even abide by. You know what I mean? Like, they just straight up fucking ignore it. So I'm like, other than filling all the hotel rooms in Glasgow for a fortnight and disrupting the entire sort of life of the city, like, what are we actually hoping that COP26 is going to achieve? Because I'm not convinced that it's going to be any more effective than some wee old fucking deer sitting on the road. You know what I mean? Like, I don't get, and maybe it's wrong me to pour water on it before it even starts, but like, you know, we're going to have the Pope and Biden and Johnson and all these other things.
Fly in private jets.
Everybody flying all around the world to tell us about how much they love the climate or how much they want to save the climate or, you know, whatever. I wonder if in these situations where the Pope comes to these things, like, I mean, a politician comes to a conference and they'll be sitting in fucking admin rooms and like conference centres and hotels, and, you know, there'll be meetings on meetings on meetings and drinks and dinners and all these other, you know, sort of things that happen at these events. Like, where does the Pope fit in on that? Is the Pope just like chilling in the corner of a room being like, people don't like that? Like, no, try that one again. Like, where is his relevance to it? Like, the same way folk like the Queen or whatever it is, if she, you know, if she's still here to come to COP in a couple of weeks' time.
What's been going on? I seen something about, like,
she was wandering about with a walking stick and then she took a day off and people were like, oh.
Okay.
And then, like, I think Nicholas Witchell was cutting about with, like, you know, the royal correspondent was cutting about in black, and people were like, oh fuck. But it's nonsense. She was back at her desk today. But these people, these figureheads, like, when they come to these events, like, what you would, you know, is the Pope coming here to actually expect to, like, negotiate deals? Is the Queen, is any of these other heads of states that are, you know, sort of figureheads? Like, if they'll know, then what's the point? What's the fucking point of having them?
I think it's the same as the protest. It's a show for the cameras, mate. It's about people's egos.
And it's like advertised, window dressing, sorry. You know what I mean? And I'm like, so we're all still fucking burning. Like, what are we actually
doing about this? Like, these are the people that are coming here are the people who can actually do something about it.
Aye.
But what are they doing? Like, it would seem like, I don't know if it's maybe, again, just a negative sort of viewpoint on it. It would seem like they're not doing very much. Like,
I mean, they may very well be doing stuff, you know, they give all this, you know, carbon offset and neutral this and net zero and blah, blah, blah. Right, cool. So, well, we've still got like half of the American West Coast on fire. Like, you know, there's droughts. There's, you know, like, what difference are these checkbox exercises making? Oh, yeah, we had X amount trillion less tons of carbon in there this year. Brilliant. What did that actually make? What difference did that make? What? Don't know.
I
I like
kind
to see
of
actual outcomes when we have the world on our doorstep. You know what I mean? Like, it's all right to go, oh, Glasgow, this great city, we love it, aye, we do. But it's the equivalent of like teams that rock up at Celtic Park now. You know, there used to be a time where they were terrified. Now it's like a pure touristy thing where they come in and go, oh, it's a great stadium. It was a great journey, a great trip. And that's kind of like where, you know, we've got an opportunity to actually like do something, and what we're going to get is people hovering about Glasgow, taking selfies and talking about how lovely the city is, and how warm a welcome they go, and you're like, cool, what the fuck did we achieve?
That's it, mate. The irony is that Boris will be there, and
I try to minimise the impact of the Scottish government in Glasgow. That's going to be an interesting wee aside. So it's like,
but just
and
the
that's what
fact
the coverage will be about, how Nicola Sturgeon and Boris Johnson are stepping on each other's toes, or no stepping on each other's toes, or avoiding each other, or whatever it is, and you'll be like, cool, we've had 5 days of that now. What was the thing we were actually here to do?
Why are we here? Just the fact that in fucking 2013, 2014, Boris Johnson wrote a fucking article in the Guardian or whatever, the Telegraph, whatever, he was a fucking editor or whatever, and citing Piers Corbyn, who's a climate denier, like,
so this is
brother of
Jeremy
Jeremy
Corbyn's
Corbyn,
mental brother, aye.
And Boris was talking about how he's a very reasonable man, and his research is very, and you're like, so Boris is basically a climate denier, right?
This motherfucker like crashed this.
Bring it in a wee bit, mate.
This guy Corbyn, or Corbyn's brother, crashed the fucking sentencing of Sarah Everard's murderer. Now, I know his name, but I'm deliberately not using it. But he was outside that verdict and that sentencing hearing, screaming about fucking tinfoil bullshit. You know what I mean? Like,
About what?
Like, you know, that climate
like
denial and
climate,
COVID, and also, and like, you know, people were actually going like, how dare you, like, intrude on this girl's justice, you know what I mean? Like, so I think that's probably all I'll ever need to know about Jeremy Corbyn's brother, other than the fact that he's Jeremy Corbyn's brother.
I mean, I've seen somebody tweet the Corbyns knew how to produce a nutcase, but I like Jeremy Corbyn, but it's just he's a divisive figure, and his brother's definitely a divisive figure.
Only if you're terrified by we old men with cabbage allotments, but
and notions of equality, which is terrifying to a lot of people, mate.
That's actually
but I mean, bringing a city to a standstill, a city that is within a nation or a political union that's currently struggling to get fruit and veg into supermarkets, shutting it down, putting big massive. I mean, have you seen
the Pope can cut
seen the barriers down at the Clyde and the big? I mean, basically.
So no, yeah, I've seen the aerial pictures of the like rough areas that are going to be closed off at various points. But I didn't pay a lot of attention because I don't drive.
I've seen people on Instagram, on Twitter, talking about how they're starting to really start to get anxious and panic about how am I going to get to work during this, and it's such an inconvenience, and it's just a show pony event. That's all that this is. Like, you know, like what Barack Obama's coming, and what a former president.
Like, what power does he wield at this point? He's a Netflix producer.
You know what I mean? He's a podcaster with Bruce Springsteen. Like come on to fuck. Like you're saying, the Pope. This just kind of feeds conspiracy, and people think that they're actually get more power than what you know, and they're here to, you know, it's like the European version of fucking whatever Grove in America. They're all coming to do their funny handshakes and negotiate their deals.
The Pope's working his way around fucking meeting rooms in the Hilton. These are like pure. I've not in here.
These are photo ops. These are like multi-million-pound costing. Like, I mean, this must be costing the Scottish economy so much money that. But they're just photo opportunities. It's an opportunity to get people in a peer to be doing something. Yeah. Like guys like Boris who will sit during the COP26 and talk about how it's been very productive and they've made time. But really, that guy is a climate denier, and his recent or his history would tell us that. So, I mean, I think that there's a lot of people in Glasgow are kind of angry about this. You know what I mean?
I think as well, like
apart from the people that have got their flats on Airbnb for like $2,000 a night. You know what I mean?
I actually seen somebody advertising, I think it was 3 nights, like a 1-bedroom flat somewhere on the south side, and it was like 1,100 quid, and they were pure 15% off. You're like, we're charging fucking cunts 1,100 quid, mate, for like 3 nights in the
everybody
South Side.
hates a landlord, right? Everybody's like,
until they can
all
actually get
landlords
to
are
be
bad
one.
until somebody dangles $1,000 in front of their nose and they're like, oh, I'll go to Edinburgh and sit in a hotel for 3 nights. You know what I mean? I'll go back to my mom's
spare bedroom.
Aye, 100%.
Make a few £100.
Aye,
Like,
it's
weird.
it goes back to that sort of Newcastle thing that we're talking about. Like, we've all got these ideas of morality until the actual incentives, the poor incentives, are dangled in front of our faces, and then everything just goes out the window. But that's not. Do you know what? That's not a criticism of the individuals. It's more a criticism of the system that enables it. You know what I mean? Same with the Newcastle fans.
Forces
you know
your
what I
on
mean?
in a lot of respects. You know what I mean? Like, my last couple of weeks would have been slightly less bumpy had I actually just fucking shut up and took the money. But I
Went and stayed with your mum.
that's not how that one panned out.
That's not going to work. We're currently talking to somebody to come in and talk about this, but I mean, what the fuck is going on with guys jumping into nightclubs with fucking syringes and spiking women?
Aye, it's horrible. I mean, I had a direct experience with it years ago with an ex-girl. Well, she was a recently ex-girlfriend at the time. Well, we'd only just broke up a few weeks, but we all had sort of communal mates and people in common, and spent all our weekends at the garage, and it was still common for us to bump into each other on the regular at that point. You know what I mean? Like, and one night I was in the garage upstairs, and our pals came up and was like, "She's been spiked," and I was like, "What the fuck?" Went downstairs, had a look, and this lassie that was just gone completely, just like a rag doll, and I had to basically take her to the Royal that night, like carry her out the garage into a taxi to accident emergency, and basically get her sort of checked out the 1 hour, and we're there to like fucking whatever 6, 7 in the morning trying to get her, sort of squared away and back up the road sort of thing. Like, and it was terrifying. You know what I mean? Like, and that was me just there witnessing it. So what you would actually feel going through that, you're out enjoying your night, you're there with your pals, you're feeling safe, you feel comfortable, and then all of a sudden you lose just all control of your bodily function because somebody wants to take advantage of you because you're asleep because they can't do it any other way. I don't know. Like, it's something that makes absolutely no sense to me, and I think it is probably important that we have this conversation because there might very well be blind spots that maybe you and I have on this where, I've very much been at the school of thought previously, well, that's not me. What the fuck is that got to do with me? I don't behave like that. But again, it's become pretty obvious that the issue is bigger than that, and maybe there are like micro aggressions, what the fuck, like blind spots, areas where we could learn something and actually improve our attitude and be more conscious of these issues. You know what I mean? Like, up until very recently, I just did not get how terrified women were of being out and about. I mean, you hear stories. We had again another mate that years ago was a victim of an abduction and stuff like that.
That story's terrifying, mate. I remembered that recently and was like, right, like what? Like somebody that we knew get grabbed, and when she reported it to the police, they found a woman chained to a fucking radiator in the guy's house. It's like, I mean, the friend that we had was lucky to get away.
Yeah.
But I mean, to think that within Mavis Bank Gardens, literally like fucking 10 minutes walk away from this studio in Glasgow City Centre, there was a woman chained to a fucking radiator and a serial rapist kicking about less than 15 years ago, and that terrifies me. Never mind, and I'm not going to get abducted, and you know what I mean. Like, that's never going to happen to me. But just the idea that that's happening in your doorstep, it's kind of terrifying in itself. To think about my girlfriend being out, and I wouldn't think twice about her like being like, I'm going to go out with my mates. It wouldn't even cross my mind that she would get spiked. It wouldn't even cross my mind.
No.
Never mind getting fucking syringed. Like somebody fucking.
I've seen stories of this.
Like this is because in the very recent future, there's been a lot of outing of people videoing, like guys dropping like pills and I think quite a lot. I've seen one where Twitter were like, we need to find this guy, and he was found within a couple of hours. As the power of the internet, and people that are fucking smarter than me for sure that do these things and like geo tag and know how to sort of pinpoint people. But to think that now that these fucking scumbags are resorting to actually like, I mean, it's bad enough that you're dropping a fucking drug into a drink, but to go about with a needle, I mean, you could end up killing somebody.
Aye,
You could give them anything with that, you know, like it actually like it kind of makes me feel ashamed to be a man, mate. Like to think that there's guys out there that are so entitled to sex that they think that they're so entitled to this that they've got a right. Somebody had screenshotted a tweet where a guy was like, "If you don't want to get spiked, don't go out." And it's like, mate, you need a straitjacket. You're either a troll, and in which case you need a fucking slap. You need somebody like your dad to be like, "What the fuck are you all about?" You know what I mean? Or you're actually one of these wee fucking incel fuckers that think that they do have a right to it.
Aye.
Some sort of like fucking born right to have sex with women, and like you're saying, you can't even coach yourself through to get the social skills to do it. So what you do is you resort to violence. And like, I mean, see if I found out that one of your mates was fucking jumping about fucking jagging women, mate, I would...
I don't even know what I'd do. I'd dread to think about it.
I would like to think that I would want to fucking tear their head off, but I think that I would be so shocked. I don't even know how I would fucking react.
I know, I'm
about
in
it,
that
mate.
respect.
Like, but just every time I hear people's stories, it gets worse. You know what I mean? I'm just like, this isn't... You know, you kind of forget about it. You kind of like, you hear stories, mates, girlfriends tell you stories about how they've been assaulted. And I don't think I know one female that has went through life without either being groped. You know, on the low level, wolf whistled or comments being made.
Aye.
Through the stages of jokes and groping and right the way through to following fucking rape and sexual assault that happens. And that is every single female that I know could tell you a story.
Oh, aye.
And like, it is genuinely our job to speak about this. Like, and like you're saying, to notice these micro things. Like we've had, I mean, I think we did a chat about it in a podcast when we first started, and then between the two years, I doubt any of your mates even listen to what we were fucking talking about, but there was screenshots going backwards and forwards as we started to go, this is what people are talking about. Like, so we'll know, we're like, within our friends group, there are people that show these there's never been anything other than, you know, I've seen the pyramid of like sort of rape culture.
Okay.
And it's always been the bottom ring of the ladder that we've brought up as examples to each other to be like, that's a bit of a red flag.
Aye.
But to hear women be like, you know, I need to assume that every man's got bad intentions because
that's horrible, man.
Some men do have bad
Unacceptable.
intentions, and it's impossible for us to spot when people have good and bad intentions. That's when I start to go like, okay, wait a minute. And even I've noticed, mate, like when I'm, you know, we are both big men, you know, and we're both quite outspoken and quite confident, you know, very much so as far as like the spectrum of confidence goes. And I've noticed sometimes when you're walking down the street and people don't even look the road that you're on, and you can actually see the sort of like fear going through them, and you're just like, fucking hell, man, like I don't want to be part of this. Like,
no,
I want to be part of this fucking solution.
Honest, and say there has been times I've been walking, you know, through town or whatever at night and be conscious of another woman and cross the road or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, made sure I walked by them, you know, overtook them as quickly as I could so that they could see me in front of them rather than hearing me behind them and stuff like that. Those are things I've definitely done in the past, but at the same time, it's wrong that, you know, women live with this type of fear. You know, when we were talking about the examples, like I think the figures recently were like 1 in 4 women have been, you know, subjected to, you know, direct like physical assault, you know, groping or worse. And it's absolutely horrifying. You know what I mean? Like, I think one of the biggest things I'm trying not to do is think about it in terms of like my wife and daughter, because I think that's one of the things we go, well, I want this to be, you know, a better thing for my daughter. You know, no, we just want it to be better. You know what I mean? Like, and I think we definitely need to get into like what we can do. You know what I mean? Like, I think if we can get the guests that we've been talking with, there's also elements of, you know, the sort of police culture and stuff like that we can address as well, hopefully. Because, you know, they're a big problem here in terms of their institutional. And again, maybe no deliberate, maybe it is. I mean, we've had horrible examples of, group chats about Sarah Everard and, obviously, jokey selfies being taken with like victims of immigrants who were killed in London. They were getting posed with selfies for the police, and there's maybe an argument for like that sort of gallows humour where you see all this horrible stuff every day. Part of how you cope with it is to joke about it in the privacy of your own wee clique, your own wee group, or whatever it is. And I don't think that flies anymore.
No,
I think they need to have a look at themselves and flag down a bus or fucking ask the officer why you're being stopped. I mean, have you ever been stopped by a police officer? I mean, I'm a guy, and like the notion that you're going to be like, what are you pulling me for, and expect to get like an actual answer for a police officer is coming for somebody who's clearly never spoken to a police officer.
Well,
you know what I mean?
I had my own personal experience of that within the last couple of years, where they pulled up in the West End, and I was like, can I ask what your reason is? And they just drove away. And I was like, what happened there?
Aye.
What the fuck happened there? Like, they just pulled up and like, blah, blah, blah. I was like, excuse me, can we have a word? And I was like, if you get a reason for stopping me? And they just get back in their motor and drove away.
Aye.
And I think it's like, I was like, I went home and was just like, kind of forgot about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what my sort of point there is that like, they've got no good reason to stop people. Like, they don't need to. I mean, there's like, the police in Glasgow very recently have not covered themselves in glory.
Anywhere on this, you know what I mean? Like the
absolutely.
Protests that were kettled and then disrupted by the Metropolitan Police down south to, some of the issues they've had up here,
I get a genuine feeling that when that happened, that when they got out the car and looked and were kind of like, oh, all right, okay, and I was like at least a foot taller than both of them. And also, I didn't shit myself. I was just like, can I ask why you're stopping me? And I didn't do it in a confrontational way. I was genuinely like, why am I being stopped here?
Aye.
I'm walking along Woodlands Road. I stay here. It's late at night, but why you stop me? And they, because they'd no reason, they've just went, oh, fuck. This isn't somebody that we're going to intimidate. Let's just go away.
Aye.
What were they going to do? Search me?
Fishing to see if you were stupid.
Aye, and like, maybe I've got to look like I smoke weed. Well, aye, absolutely I do. So maybe they've been thinking, oh, we'll fucking pat them down and we'll find something on them. But like, for police officers to have, in very recent times, murdered women, and for the advice to come for the official source to be like, question them. What, are they going to just go?
Police officers on that guy's squad, and sorry, I nearly said his name there. There was police officers on that guy's squad who were giving character witness statements in his defence. And
he had the nickname the rapist. Did they know? Like, he was the creep.
Right.
And so
I hadn't heard that.
There was like a thing about when he was doing his training, they referred to him as the rapist. That was like his nickname, and he was like the creep of the squad, and yet they still come out and defend him. So it's I mean, these institutions have had decades, if no centuries, of lack of accountability, and now they're being held to account. We're getting to see the flaws in it, and that actually they're human beings with a power trip. And what type of people does that institution attract?
I mean, the figures on instances of domestic abuse within the Metropolitan Police Force I found just absolutely staggering. I mean, like hundreds a year, and you're like, what? Surely this is something that should exclude anybody from serving in the police force. Whether it's before, during, or after their service. Like, how are they? Because there's clearly are still guys who have been involved in domestic abuse incidents are still serving on the force. You know what I mean? Like, and I just don't get how that's even possible, and how then the public can then trust that these guys can then be relied on when, these situations occur. But again, hopefully that's stuff that we can get into down the line with the guests we've got lined up. But I definitely think it's a conversation that we definitely need to be having, because...
Aye, absolutely. Find it kind of like weird and almost coming to say, we say a lot of it, we know that we're just two white men that are talking about these issues and talking about issues of like, sexual assault amongst women. Maybe it should be women to talk about it. Women have done enough talking about this. Like, we know we know what's going on. Like, there's no hiding it anymore. It's our responsibility, I think, to hold other men accountable. And any guy being like, well, it's no me, and it's like, but it could be you. And even
it's
just
like the racism
realising
thing.
that,
It's no when we had the Black Lives Matter, it wasn't about being not racist. It was about being anti-racist, and I think we're having that type of sort of watershed moment in terms of this conversation as well, where it's no me needs to be what am I doing to make sure that it's not any is. You know what I mean? Like, and we're going for being no involved in rape culture to being anti-rape culture in the same way that we went from being no racist to being, you know, anti-racist in the last year or so. And I think that's a kind of similar sort of trajectory that we're on with this conversation. I think that's probably why it's important to have it, because there are clearly elements of it that you and I have never considered before, and probably a lot of other men haven't considered before.
Absolutely. And we'll wrap up on that. We'll go back to saying that as a psychologist and as a therapist, like, anybody that feels an emotion when people are sharing stories of rape or sexual assault, take a look at yourself. Don't go out and project it to these women and tell them that they're wrong, or that, nah, don't do that. Take a long, hard look at yourself. Why is this emotion coming up?
Aye.
Like, why are you so triggered by people criticising men for their actions? Like, and I think, like, I take a look at yourself and see if you have done it. Just hold your hands up and just go, I didn't know. There's no need for you to be like, no, it's no all men, and what can I do about it? Well,
Aye.
you know what you can do? You can talk to your fucking mates. If a group chat message comes through and somebody's, you know, objectifying women, you can just have an individual chat with them and going, I don't really like that, mate. And I think it sort of leads to this sort of stuff. And if your mates are going, I don't believe that, then fucking get them to fuck.
Aye. But I think that reaction you're talking about, that sort of visceral, you know, is something that has become really sort of prominent and sort of, you know, dangerous, and we definitely need to start asking more questions when we encounter that. You know what I mean? Like, I think when you look in the last couple of weeks about the lassie and Lenny Saurus or whatever it is, the TikTok lassie who does the Scots word of the day, and then we had the lassie Emma, who's author of Be Good to Your Mammy. They're, you know, Scots content creators for, you know, as broad a term as possible. Young women, Scottish, and speaking in their sort of native tongues, and like some of the abuse they've received in the last couple of weeks is exactly that. You know, how am I meant to understand this? And, you know, that we've spoken about Scots before, so I'm not going to go back into it, but I've seen that reaction you're talking, that visceral, like, well, hold on a minute, you know, like, and the anger that comes with it, portrayed really sort of clearly in the last couple of weeks through the experience that these young women have went through. Did say on Twitter, like, you know, solidarity, but again, you know, they've been victims of just absolute nonsensical fucking overreactions for this knee jerk that people seem to like now have, you know, as part of their instant reaction to thing. You know what I mean? And you know, hope they can get a bit of peace and quiet and go on with their lives. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, mate. Right, we'll just wrap there, mate.